John Temple. I have described him a little bit, but I will let him further describe himself. Um, One distinguishing feature is he lives on a super volcano, um, which, right? I mean, you own a big patch of a super volcano.
Yep.
Uh, yep, and you own expensive firearms that I hope one day to get to play with. Um, but the proximate cause of your visit to us here today is your dream. Well, in a larger way, your interest in dreams, right? And I think it's fair to say your interest in Jung. Yeah,
Yes.
is that fair? Right. This is a so we're going to be talking a lot of sort of Jungian dream theory and philosophy, presumably, and that's, as you know, I'm big on that. Have you got the new? They have that new edition of the Red Book out. Um,
Um, I guess it depends on how new.
well, like the last 2 or 3 years, I think.
Huh. Um, I'm
Well,
not sure. Mine is probably a little older than that.
yeah, it's kind of an accessible version. It's because it's always been pretty expensive, but they came out with a kind of an accessible version of it. All right, well, wait a second
Yes.
now. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this in such a clever way here. There we go. Okay, so you and I will be spotlighted. Matt, where's Matt? Matt Gordon, is the stream up and running? Okay, well, probably I should have told you this, John, but we're streaming on Twitch right now.
Lovely.
We have a Twitch channel that we stream our special guests on, and yeah, and our readings and stuff like that. So here we are, on stream. So okay, so we're gonna talk, Jung. We're gonna talk dreams, and then in a more specific way, I suppose we'll talk about the app that you are building or engaged in building, and I've played with it some, and had a good deal of fun with it, and feel that I know you better now that I have read your dreams.
Inevitably.
Uh, but I mean, I'm obviously I'm a snide son of a bitch, but I'm also quite sincere, right? Like, I mean, it really is a great way to get to know people. It's a confessional form. It's a narrative rather than an informational form, so that people are telling you things they probably don't even suspect that they're telling you, right? They're telling you things that you can interpret intuitively rather than representing themselves in a way that they can carefully manipulate or curate, right? In the way that we do on social media.
Exactly. A good friend of mine pointed out to me relatively early on something that I didn't appreciate, which is what you've just pointed out, which is, in a way, it's sort of the anti-social media, because it is impossible to curate your own dreams. Like, your dreams come from something that is you, but also really isn't you, is sort of autonomous. And so if you're willing to share them and actually put them up, truthfully and honestly, it is kind of, it's a level of authenticity that you're not even aware of yourself to some degree.
Mhm. Right.
And that's pretty stunning, and I think pretty unusual, out there now.
Well, and I think it's also, and it is also, right. My theory of story, or is that the dream is the perfect form of the story, right? That whatever we're creating, the closer we get to the conditions of the dream, the better we're doing as fiction writers, right? Because dreams are whole in and of themselves. They don't have to make reference to an independent physics, right, or a
Right.
broadly applicable physics, or a broadly applicable set of circumstances. Subject matter is sort of beside the point, right? In a way, or it is, or you're not choosing your subject matter anyway,
Hmm.
right? That the subject matter chooses you, and there's no data dump at the beginning of a dream that explains to you what's happening. Dreams begin in medias res; they end on action, right? They don't come to a sort of neat conclusion with a moral sort of a moral coda. But the main thing I love about dreams is their completeness, right? That they examined from the outside, they may come apart, they won't make sense. But in and of themselves, they absolutely make sense, right? Or sense is not needed, or at least not the non-dreaming sense. And they're also entirely immersive. That is, except for a very few of us. And I'd be interested to hear if this applies to you. We don't know that we're dreaming, right? I mean, it's just experience. It's just something that's happening to you. Without your ability to understand that your brain is telling you a story. And of course, I'm interested in brain chemistry and sort of brain makeup generally, right? And even what we think is happening to us is just a story that our waking brain is telling us, right? I mean, we're taking in little bits and pieces of information and telling ourselves that there is this sort of holistic vision, right, that we have of the world. Yeah, that we're seeing. Somebody told me that apparently our eyes, right, our vision is like a 4K data stream. Like it's not much. It's less than what you have coming into your house near the super volcano, probably, right, by orders of magnitude. Um, and but we're putting all that together, and of course, it's none of it is present. Anyway, too much. But right, so dream is what I'm interested in the end. Yeah, is a completely natural, organic, sort of history-less story. Yeah, that is completely involving, that arouses emotion, right? That you can love in a dream, you can lust in a dream, you can be terrified in a dream. And I've never had a dream that was boring or that I woke up and thought, damn, that was, there wasn't much to that. Like they're deep, right? I mean,
Yeah.
inevitably they're important. Well, anyway, so that's my whole theory of dream. And the reason that, besides it's just being interesting and you're an interesting guy who does interesting stuff, you're a writer. Um, so, that's one of the reasons this immediately, well, it maybe says something. Jody, we'll have to talk about the fact that your dreams are boring. Um, so anyway, I'll turn it over to you now. But that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of the relationship of dream to story to fiction to what graduate students might think they're doing.
Yeah. A lot of stuff there, but I mean, a ton of stuff, obviously, in dreams. Um, uh, I guess one of the things that has always fascinated me about dreams is that I think that it's been said that the psyche basically is telling you a story about something that you don't know and you're not yet conscious of. You might have an unconscious real appreciation for it, which sort of the psyche is in charge of in some sort of very large unconscious way, but it's trying to bring something forward to your consciousness. And by definition, anything that is outside of your consciousness is very, very hard to get at and very, very hard to see. And your ego tends to be very resistant to hearing any of that or to learning any of that. Jung had said that basically any true experience of the unconscious um, is experienced by the ego as a defeat, as a failure, because I always think of I always think of kind of your ego as this little 3 foot 2 inch tall character marching along in front of this massive parade, with his, with his little baton, and thinking he's in charge of the parade. And he's sitting there saying, I'm in charge of all this stuff. And the parade is kind of your unconscious and everything else that's going on. And he's marching along, and it turns out the parade turned that way, and he just kept going that way. And then he has to run around and, oops, wait a second, I've got to go get back in front of the parade again. Because the ego imagines that it's in charge of all of this stuff, when in fact it really isn't. And that's why any real experience of it tends to be a bit of a defeat for the ego. And it's also why it's so difficult to get at what a dream sort of is trying to get across to you. There are many, many different ways of trying to understand a dream and trying to kind of get at what its point is. But one of them is, to look at it as a story, and I call these things frameworks. And that is basically to look at the dream as a story, or as a play, and that there is a setting, a scene, there are characters, and it begins, and then something happens, and then something transforms, and then there is another scene and another set of characters, and something else happens, and then that results in another transformation. And that that one of the ways to try and look at a dream is as a story, because you can think of it as your psyche is trying to get something across to you, that is very difficult to get you to hear. In a similar vein, people will say, well, oh, I have nightmares, and or I don't, like my brother, for example, doesn't remember many of his dreams, but he remembers his nightmares. And one of the things, one of the theories about that is that a nightmare is just a story that your psyche is trying to present to you and trying to get something across to you, but your consciousness is so resistant to it that effectively your psyche has to start screaming, has to start really scaring you and frightening you, grabbing you by the lapels, if anybody has lapels anymore, and shaking you.
I bet there's not a lapel in the room.
Exactly. No, not many lapels here. Perhaps the scruff of your neck, I don't know. um, but it's trying to get a point across to you, and it uses a variety of different sort of means to do that. And so, for example, with nightmares, one of the useful things is to try and look at it and say, what is it that about this dream that I am so resistant to, and so resistant to learning, that that it just terrifies me, that I just shut down in fear. And if you can sort of begin to crack that a little bit, if you can get a thread of that and begin to pull on it, well, then you can start to kind of unravel a little bit of what a dream is supposedly meaning, and is trying to get across. Because one of the other very common ideas is that, quoted by one of the acolytes of Jung, was that the psyche doesn't waste a lot of spit on things that you already know. So assume for a moment that any dream you have is trying to get something across to you that you don't know. And so if you have the dream and you immediately think, oh, I know what that's about that and that and that and that, odds are you're wrong. Odds are it's not that. Because why would the psyche bother telling you that story? Because it isn't trying, it's specifically, if it's boring, it means that you're not hearing what it wants you to hear, or what it's trying to get across. And so anyway, I always look at that as a hint to myself, as like, okay, I probably don't fully kind of grok this dream yet, because if I think I just
now
get
grok, maybe you and I are familiar with the term grok, but grok. But do folks know grok, and do you know where it's a great verb, and it's a verb that you should absolutely have in your, raise your hand either virtually or in reality if you know what the verb grok to grok means, grok. Okay, do you mind, John, taking a second to because it's such a good concept. It's
Oh, I
really
love it. It's one of my favorite words ever. It was
oh,
coined
Kevin
by.
knows. You can go, Kevin.
Oh, okay, go for it.
No, I'm saying he can leave.
Oh,
Oh.
bye.
That's the lesson for today. So he's
um,
excused.
it was coined by, I always get mixed up. I'm pretty sure it's Roger Heinlein, in around
Robert.
70, Robert? Okay,
Mhm.
around 71 thereabouts, in the book Stranger in a Strange Land. And it essentially means to understand something in a holistic way. It's a very it's to understand something intuitively. So it's kind of like the difference between it's kind of like the difference between you can read a book about driving a car, but until you've driven a car a bunch of times, then you kind of really grok what it is to drive a car, because you have a physical knowledge of it, an intuitive knowledge of it, a muscle memory of it. You have an apprehension of all of the experience of something that's going on, that's really beyond explicit, rational, description. And so I've always loved it because I think it applies tremendously to somebody who is deeply, deeply expert in something, who just knows things without trying anymore. And that to me is kind of what grok
Yeah.
is.
So just and I think it's a good word to use about dreaming too, right? Because there is that kind of intuitive like experience of something rather than knowledge of something.
Yes.
Yeah. That it's, it's not, you're not getting, and I think in a way, this is what you were talking about with why would your brain tell you, or your subconscious tell you about something you already know, right? Is that it's not, you're not getting information, right? It's not bullet points, it's experience. It's, there is information to be gleaned from experience, but experience does not equate to, or I mean, information does not equate to experience or to that sort of holistic knowing.
Definitely. It's sort of
But
bone level knowledge.
yeah, plus it's just such a great, it's one of the best invented verbs. And I think Heinlein really did invent it. I don't think he just popularized it. I think he made up the word. And maybe it's now leaving the language since none of these folks knows it,
Yeah.
but I hope not, because it's a really useful verb.
Yeah.
Anyway, my apologies, but that's the kind of lesson we learn here in English 592A fiction seminar.
Yeah. And one of the things that you were talking about before in terms of writing, I mean, there's the way to look at dreams as, as a play, as a story, and to try and use that structure to help you kind of peel back what's going on. But that only works some of the time, because sometimes a dream is just an image. It's just one thing, and that's all. Um, uh, but the I mean, I think part of the reason that you engage, or I'm guessing part of the reason that you engage with dream work, kind of whatever that is because it touches on the nature of the creative process. And one of the things that I like the most about trying to kind of work with dreams is that it is a way of that the creative process cannot be all will and ego and intention, and it cannot also, nor can it be, all unconscious, all dream, all of that, because unconscious will just take you wandering off into nowhere. And anybody who isn't you, it's like it's as if you were trying to publish your dream as a story. Anybody who isn't you is going to be like, what the hell is this, like, but it means a great deal to you. But on the other side, any creative outlet that sort of doesn't involve unconscious is sort of one of those things where you haven't gone to the well and brought back something truly individual and truly new. And so then it's very kind of dry and desiccated. And it's that that process of trying to work with those two opposites at the same time, and out of that bring something, into being, that I think is tremendously interesting. Um, and honestly, as Pinckney knows, I've taken his course before, and or one of his courses, and was having difficulty getting from a kind of just a kind of personal history type of story into something truly creative, and that for me is my challenge, is to try and get beyond just trying to tell my own old story in a slightly creative way into something that is truly sort of creative, and not just something that I've seen before or done before, or known people who've done, or all of that. And that to me is the fun part, and that's kind of part of my interest in dreams, is that being able to kind of pick from both of those worlds.
Well, and so, okay, so how does this then get you to an app?
Oh yeah, yeah. How does it get me to an app? So uh, kind of just a functional thing. I have spent a bunch of time as an entrepreneur in the past, um, and the thing that I find guides me best in that space is when I see something that I just think should exist. It just should exist, and it doesn't exist, or the things that exist suck. And I'm just like, this needs to exist. I'm really annoyed that it doesn't exist, and I have a great interest in it. So my last big company was I'm very eclectic, was involved in elder care and helping people find elder care, because nothing like that really existed. And so we went out and did that, and did really well. And that was fun, building something and creating something that didn't exist, that I thought should. And it wound up, people thought that that was valuable and worthwhile and liked it. The Dream app comes out of just my like deep fascination with dreams, combined with my sort of aggravation that we've got this technology, but nobody has put technology together with some of what I think are the better kind of thoughts and theories around dreams and how that all works, and brought them together in such a way that to help people catch dreams more easily, because everybody complains, oh, I have dreams, but I never remember them. And then work with some of the symbols inside those dreams, and then share them with either friends, acquaintances, or professionals who have done this stuff for a long time, and try and kind of work with it in that sense. And I kind of kept looking around, and nothing like that existed, and I was like, well, fine, I'll just go build it. So that's what I'm working on doing.
And can you tell us sort of what I mean? Because first of all, we're a couple of this applies to our class and our program here generally in a couple of ways, right? One is just as you say, dreams are fascinating, and literary dreams, as I said to the students last week, generally are terrible. Like if I come to a dream sequence in a film or a book, I'll generally speaking just sort of fast forward through it, right? Because it's usually in storytelling just an opportunity for a kind of openly symbolic. Um, uh, you know, it's like, well, if you didn't get what I was talking about in the story proper, I'm going to have the character have a dream now that where I can just lay out the symbols, very plainly, and that kind of thing. It's really a waste of time because it can't affect anything in the story,
Mhm.
right? The way dreams are usually used in fiction. So it's talking about how can dream material actually be useful in fiction, right? Without just making it a sort of symbolic rehashing of the story you were already telling, which is not what dreams are like at all, generally speaking.
Hmm.
Or at least if it is, it's the most pedestrian idea of dreams. And so how to use that dream material, but we also deal with tech, right? That most creative writing programs are artifacts of the 1980s, if you're lucky, right? That you know that they're built around those of us who were trained in the 20th century, and those of us who were trained in the 20th century were trained on principles that were adduced and new in the 30s, right? So we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of creative writing workshops, and they haven't changed that much, but a lot of things have changed, right? I mean, the way stories are told now, what literature is now is such an interesting question, right? Like, that is, is there literature on your phone? Are games literature? Can podcasts be literature? I mean, my answer, of course, is yeah, absolutely. But I mean, that's in flux. That's a discussion or an argument, depending on how drunk you are, that society is having right now, right? So you're a writer. You're really interested in dream material. You are an entrepreneur. You build businesses, that kind of thing, and you've decided on this form for what you're creating. And that seems, I mean, I hope these folks will be creating apps, right? And what you say about your motivation being you look around you, you, you imagine things that should exist, but that don't exist, that deeply interest you, and then you make those things. Well, I mean, that's a description of what a writer does, right?
Hmm.
You look at your bookshelf, you look at, the movies that are available on Netflix, you look at the games you can play, whatever, and you say, well, I've never, seen a game where I can do X, or where I could find X, or I haven't, right? You write the books that aren't yet on your bookshelf, but that you wish were there. Yeah. And so all of this strikes me as, all of these impulses are um, related. I mean, right? They're what we do, and yet in the academy, right? And you're not in the academy, which is again, well, but see, that's one of the reasons for us to talk to you, right? Is we end up talking to ourselves a lot and to people who are in the academy a lot. Right. And in the academy, creative writing is one thing. It's really unidimensional in most of the academy. Right. And there's great resistance to are deciding we're moving away from Gutenberg, right,
Hmm.
and more toward Ray Kurzweil or somebody, yeah, that we're supposed to be just Gutenberg people forever, and we'll just eventually cease to exist, right?
Yep.
Or we'll be kind of an interesting, like some tribe in Papua New Guinea that, right, has never been in touch with the outside world. But you can help us prevent that, right? So, is there like how do you decide to make an app? What or how does that even occur to you in a way, right? Because we should be making apps that are just our stories, right? In my opinion. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess I mean the thread of that jumps to my mind is uh, in the con. I mean, for me, making an app is it's really about just trying to kind of make something that I do every day much simpler. Because I always record my dreams and then I transcribe them by hand and then I try and write about them and try and like, I found I'm doing the same damn thing over and over again. I'm like, okay, this needs to be easier, much easier. And so go and build something that does that. But then to create a community of people who are doing that kind of thing and working with that stuff all at the same time, for me, I think is really, really fun because in my mind, there has not yet existed, um, well, and I think I'm objectively right about this, something that has, hundreds of thousands of dreamers engaging with their dreams every night, recording what symbols there are there, and then working with them and talking with them to one another. And when you begin to boil that up at some level, that becomes really, really interesting because Pinckney, you might begin to notice when you go through the app, it has, so for you guys who don't know, it has one section where you can share your dreams publicly, and other, most of your dreams you might keep privately. But there are lots and lots of dreams that are public out there now, just on.
Oh, I mean, I spent a couple of hours yesterday just going through them and trying, and sort of putting together like, oh, oh, that's another JLS dream,
Yeah,
right? Like I don't know who the people are, but I know like JLS, I know JLS in some
it-
ways, right?
exactly. And if I took off after you've gone through all the dreams, if I took off the names and a new dream came up, you would probably pretty quickly
Oh
know,
yeah.
oh, that's that
No,
person,
they
that's
really have
that
a
person.
fingerprint. Yep.
Right. They have the tremendous fingerprint. And I think that there's something really interesting about the idea of individual personal symbolism that and the patterns and the kind of constellations that each person sort of carries with them. And that as you begin to kind of become take a sort of meta view of that and understand that across many, 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 many people, I think something interesting comes out of that. And I don't know what yet, but my instinct is there's something that could be really fun in that space. But but the other part of what you were talking about that I wanted to comment on was in terms of technology and the departure from the academy, and how where we are now, particularly as regards stories, is something that I'm going to do in probably a version 2 or 1.5 of the Dream app, and that is we've been working a little bit with AI in an effort to try and train it on a few thousand dream analyses that people have said, yeah, that resonated with me, that kind of made sense to me, and to try and get an AI to try and do that and kind of make a stab at it. um, and uh, and I think that I think it'll be terrible at it. And initially, when we do it, I will market it as humorous. It's like, don't
Right.
take this too seriously, but here's something fun. But there's a dimension of that that's one interesting thing about it is, for example, Jung himself, um, when he had a dream and wanted to that he didn't understand, and wanted some help analyzing it, because he recognized, like everybody, that analyzing your own dreams is incredibly difficult. Other people can easily have a much clearer view of your stuff than you do, because you have built-in resistances to understanding your own unconscious. And so going with someone else helps. But Jung, who created this stuff, I mean, he and Freud, but also, particularly him, um, even in his late life, rather than go to his kind of acolytes, who were brilliant people, because he didn't bother with anybody who wasn't ridiculously brilliant. Um, he didn't go to his people for that. When he had a dream that he didn't understand, he took it to his gardener, and he would tell his dream to his gardener, who has no training in any of this stuff, and ask his gardener what he thought. And the point wasn't that the gardener had brilliant insights per se. The point was that when the gardener got it wrong, that helped Jung understand something about the dream that he hadn't known, that bumped him in a slightly different direction and increased his own understanding of that dream. And from my perspective, I think that in the Dream app, having an AI just guess stuff, but get it wrong, but it's a way to put your own sort of unconscious psyche in not conflict, but in contact with something else, and something, some third thing bumps out of that. And that, from a creativity and writing standpoint, I think is really interesting. From a dream standpoint, I think it's completely fascinating, and I think it could be kind of fun from a writing standpoint. And I'm sure you guys have probably played with what, GPT-3. I always forget
Yep.
what the stuff
Yeah,
is.
we've been playing with GPT-3. We just did we had a conversation with a bunch of AI professors and engineers at Oxford on Saturday morning that
Oh,
a
okay.
lot of these folks contributed to, but the AI experience, the GPT-3 experience, and the Dream experience are very much related, right? And the idea you bounce things off the AI and it comes back at you in these very peculiar angles, which
Right.
aren't right, okay, but they shed a kind of light that it would have been impossible for someone with your training or your reactions to come up with. And
And they
as you
just bump
say,
you slightly at a different direction, which is
yes,
very useful.
it's very useful, and it really does become this colloquy, right? If you go back and forth with GPT-3, and you begin to sense being, it's very interesting, right? And very interesting for creative work in a way that just hasn't been exploited.
Yeah.
um, that people, creatives go, oh, AI is my enemy. And
Mm.
well, if it's your enemy, then you're done because AI is everywhere. But right, but it's not. I mean, I think it clearly is not. It's a potentially incredibly powerful partner in exactly the way you talk about dreams, right? And so those two things concatenating, right? I think that's going to be a really powerful use of AI.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be really fun. And a big part of my fascination with the dream work is my fascination with the idea of symbols, which, from a Jungian standpoint, um, you know, the, and I'm not going to do this terribly well, but kind of Jung's perspective on symbols is that they are unlike a stop sign, unlike signs. Like a stop sign is a sign; it means one thing, stop, that's it, end of story. It's very reductive. A symbol is something that amplifies. It looks like a bear, but it has 100,000 other meanings that stretch out beyond that. And uh, and, let's see. Um, anyway, and so in that sense, um, the thing that's fun for me in playing with dreams is playing with symbolism and trying to get your arms around that, because a lot of the premise of Jungian kind of psychology is that symbolism, is part and parcel with these archetypes that we have inherited over millennia, and that are almost like a DNA that come along with us, and we don't necessarily have any um, learning of them in our lives, but they are embedded in sort of who we are as people, um, as humans, and that they are just kind of naturally there. And to be able to play in that space and play with those symbols, I think AI will never, or will, I don't want to say never, but I think that stuff will be very hard for AI to really begin to get to. But I do think that it will, be able to give you, give us, some structure and some things around that. But the degree to which we each can increase our contact with and sort of unconscious, well, bring unconscious experience of symbols into consciousness, is the degree to which we can create much richer, more profound, you know, things that resonate with all of us as humans. And so I think that, to me, I think that is tremendously fun. And that's kind of all I want to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it really is the stuff of humanity. We I grew up in a place and a time where if you wanted to talk about your dreams or compare dreams or that kind of thing, right? It was just, I mean, I grew up on a farm. I grew up, my family was like, well, that's stupid. Like dreams are just, sort of weird things that happen while you're asleep. And mostly you just shouldn't bother to try to remember them, right? They're kind of embarrassing. I mean, but like emotion in my family was embarrassing, right? Feeling emotion was exhibiting weakness. Yeah. I'm a pretty emotional person, organically. Yeah. And my dreams are really important to me. But if you read enough, you come to find out, oh, like it's not that that's just okay, that's right. We've arrived at the truth of dreams. It's just like waste energy, while you're sleeping. I mean, almost no other people ever, anywhere, at any time, including the present and certainly the future, has ever dismissed their dreams
Yeah.
in the way, sort of North Americans in the 20th century did, right?
Yeah.
That we're tossing away what other cultures have thought of as either an equal life, right? And in many cultures, actually the true life. Yeah, that what we're doing now while we're conscious, this is a dream, right? This is an illusion. And the thing we do when we sleep is we see into the real world, right? And it was such a. I mean, that was when I realized that, like, oh, like my family is not right about dreams, or at least they're vastly in the minority of people throughout history and
History,
around
right?
the world, right? That there's anyway. It's so nice to be able to talk about dreams as serious things, right? Or as things that we need not to just sort of put away when we wake up,
Yeah.
right? I'm
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah. I was gonna say you begin to appreciate the connection that you have as an individual to the human experience that has gone on for millennia, which kind of nobody talks about now, and yet, you know, everything that like as a prime driver of like much of human history, this stuff has been a huge part, and I think we ignore it at our peril.
I agree. I think it's deadly to ignore it. I think a lot of the pathologies of the 20th century and
Yep.
early 21st century are because we don't, we think that this, sort of consensus world is the world,
Hmm.
right? And I really think so. So but you're a serious guy. You're around serious people, other entrepreneurs, other successful people. So what do the people around you make of, John Temple, Titan of industry, is now, living in a super volcano and fiddling with dreams, right? And asking his friends to write about their dreams.
Yeah. Uh, I don't know. I'm kind of getting a little bit used to it because before I started my last company, I was at Microsoft for 10 years in the 90s when they were kind of at their heyday. And I was working on mobile applications for phones, just before Apple came out and trumped all that. But kind of in the white hot, like cool part of technology at the time. And I quit that to go and start a company to help people find elder care. And people thought I was completely batshit. But it was one of those things where I'm like, I think there's something really to be done over here. And it doesn't seem like anything you guys are figuring out anything over here. That worked out. So at this point, I'm just like, so what? Like, I'm just used to it. Like, I'm going to just spend my energy on things that I care about and that turn my crank. And they may work out, they may not work out, but I do actually have a little bit of a record of when I go that way, it works out. Or that I do have a sense that there is something here. I may not be able to pull it off, but if I can kind of bump the world a little bit more in that direction, that'll be fun. Because what else have I got to do? Like, I mean, like do something that you care about.
A friend who left Microsoft to do theater. Now that really is crazy. Let's just admit that was nuts and wrong. But no, I agree. I mean, I get, I've taken shit for years and still take shit for my, the joy I take in things like VR and games and, and stuff like that. Like that's not the proper, that's not the proper concentration for a serious writer. Well, then I guess I'm not a serious writer, because that stuff's part of me, right? I mean, I can't say I don't like those things, and I can't stop relating them to the work everybody thinks I ought to be doing.
Yeah, and
Uh,
this is fundamental to like a lot of Jungian stuff is, are you going to be your true individual self, or are you going to, listen to what the collective thinks you should be doing? And the collective is usually death, for the individual. Like they just you can't go that way. You have to follow the stuff that really works for you. You might, wind up homeless, but you will have, you know you will have a life that kind of is yours.
Right, you'll be yourself.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, and
Mhm.
and the other thing is you might well not end up homeless,
Right.
right? I mean,
Right.
it turns out this stuff, if you hang on to it long enough and are sort of fierce enough in its defense, yeah. And I'm looking at Matt Gordon here because Matt and I have been working the gaming territory in academia now together for about 3-4 years, I guess. Um, oh, has it been that long? See, but so, and we've gone from people openly mocking us now to people having to mock us in private because
Good job.
right. So there's that. Well, so John, I promised you I would get you off of here by 10 till 5 your time. What this group of people is now going to do is they're going to go away, and I've got a writing assignment, an in-class writing assignment that I can give them. But the other thing we can do, and I'm sorry to spring this on you at the last minute, but nasty surprises are my middle name. But is there something they could write about? Now we've got coming back at 7, and you're certainly welcome to join us. But I know you're a busy dude. 7 o'clock our time, 6 o'clock your time. They're going to come back, and we're actually going to play a game about dreams, right? They have each written a real dream, and then they have manufactured a dream, and we're
Oh,
going to listen to them read and see if we can tell the difference, right? Like,
oh, I love
are,
this game.
are we good at figuring out what a real dream is? But is there something like, is there a list of things that you would like a group of bright young writers? And I would have said that ironically in one of my graduate classes at SIU years ago. I'd have said, but these are actually bright people. Like I like and respect these folks. So, which is, it gives me the shivers to say that. I sort of can't believe it. Um, but is there something they could do? Is there a list of things that 10 young people could make in half an hour that would be helpful to you, or that might, is there any way they can help you with their writing in the next half hour? Don't, if not, I've got an assignment, but if there's anything you can think of, I'm happy to
um
put their brains to it.
let's see. It, I have one thought, which is, I am trying to create a bunch of frameworks to help people understand their dreams. I kind of think this is a little orthogonal to what your game is and what you're trying to do. Um,
That's all
uh,
right. That's
in
okay. Go ahead.
what what I would do, what I could do is I could send to you this kind of rough breakout of, here are 7 ways to think about a dream, and most dreams don't fit with all of them, but you can sort of pick one and kind of think about it from that standpoint. Um, uh, if anybody wanted to take a look at that and kind of see whether thinking through a dream on those terms moves anything, or lights a bulb for them in any way, that's kind of interesting.
Okay.
I think it's very different than what you're saying is here's the real dream, here's not the real dream.
Well, but they've
But
already done that. Like we don't
okay,
need to do that again. That's already in the can, and that's the game we're going to start playing, in an hour or so. So this is quite different. This is structural, and that's the other part of what we do, right? Is structural work, talking about why our brains organize stories the way that they do,
yeah,
right? Exactly. So do you have that you could
yeah. I'll
send
send
me
it to
and I can
you in
distribute
about
it?
5 minutes.
Okay, great, very good.
Cool. All right, and
All
then
right.
I'd love to join and listen in on your next
You're more than welcome to. It'll be 7 o'clock our time. Or I
one.
forget. Are you Mountain Time?
At the moment, I'm actually not in Montana. At the moment, I'm
Oh,
in California. Um,
oh, okay. So
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 a couple
right now
hours.
it's 4 p.m.
Yeah.
there. Yeah, it'll be at 5 p.m. your time.
What? Okay, great. Yeah, I'd love to join.
We will, which is 7 our time, and we'll spend about 50 minutes playing our dream game.
Great.
So if you want to come back, we'd love to have you back,
Love
and
to listen in.
we can give you the results from your structure list too.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Terrific.
thank you. We'll
Good
see
deal.
you.
Thank you,
We'll see
everybody.
you
Nice talking to you.
shortly.
All right. See ya.
Okay, so I will get the list from him, and I'm not sure exactly what the list is going to be, but that's fine. Like it sounds like it's like props narratives for the folktale, or that it's a potential structure. So maybe take a little time and just look at the real dream that you're going to give us tonight, and see how it fits into this pattern, and see if maybe the pattern will help you actually to create a convincing fictional dream, right? Because the end result of this, what I want the end result of this to be, is that you can write a dream to include in your stories that is both useful to the story, right? It's not just this, random weird shit, but that also within the story feels like an actual dream, and not a symbolic recapitulation of the story. Okay. So I'll send that out via email as soon as I get it. Or maybe what I'll do is put it in the chat here. And I guess I could have just gotten him to put it in the chat, couldn't I? But oh well. Hang on. And I'm looking forward to your dream stuff as well. Well, I actually, just everybody, I mean, shut off your camera and your mic. But when I get the thing from him, I'll just put it in the chat. Oh, it's just stock looping video. That's that's what most of my backgrounds are. I find looping video and put it in the back.
I guess Stranger Things was on my mind. Somehow it fits in with the dream.
Yeah, well, no, Stranger Things is very dreamlike, right? And particularly for those of us who were that age in the 70s and 80s, it really is like a dream version of a life many of us lived. Um, so, okay, well, very good. And don't worry too much about what we're doing with this thing. We'll just look at it and see what occurs to you, and see how it applies. And take a few notes if some notes occur to you. All right, look for it in the chat, and I will see you all back here at 6:20